You ever think about how something as simple as water could hold the key to spiritual practice for millions of people? Well, today, we're diving deep into that. We're going to explore the really profound rules of purity all through the life and work of one of history's most brilliant legal minds.
Okay, so the man at the center of our story is Imam al-Shafi'i. And let me tell you, he wasn't just any scholar. His understanding was so deep, so profound, that people called him the Sultan of Scholars. And that's not just some fancy title, you know. It was a real recognition of his incredible influence. The guy was a genius at bringing together different legal schools of thought.
So here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll get into the story of Imam Shafi himself, his life, his journey for knowledge. Then, we'll pivot to his actual work. We'll look at what purity really means, where purifying water comes from, and then we'll break down the different types of water and the rules for each. It's going to be good.
All right, let's get right into it. Who was Imam Shafi? Well, his story kicks off with a pretty incredible lineage. I mean, we're talking about a direct connection to the family of the Prophet Muhammad.
And you know, this amazing heritage wasn't just something to brag about. It literally put him right at the heart of the intellectual and spiritual world of early Islam. Think about it. He had direct access to all the sources and traditions that he would spend his entire life studying and preserving.
But here's the thing. It was his incredible, relentless hunt for knowledge, not just his family tree, that really sealed his legacy. And this whole journey, it started when he was just a little kid.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It really shows you his life was just this constant quest for knowledge. Check out these milestones. The entire Quran memorized by age 7, and then he's cleared to give legal rulings fatwas at 15. The man was a total prodigy, dedicating his whole life to learning and then teaching others.
And all this travel, this journey, it actually led to a really famous shift in his thinking. First, in Baghdad, he set up what we now call his old school of thought. But then he moves to Egypt, and everything's a little different, right? New questions, new situations. So he refines his ideas, he develops them, and that becomes his new school. All of this is laid out in his masterpiece, and it's the school of thought that millions of people still follow today.
Okay, so we've met the man, the master himself. Now let's get into his method. And we're going to start with a concept that is just absolutely core to daily worship for Muslims everywhere.
And that brings us to the main idea here, tahara, or purity. What Imam Shafi did was give everyone this super clear framework for understanding it. Because, you see, the word has a simple, everyday meaning, but it also has a very specific, technical, legal one. So, linguistically, tahara just means, well, cleanliness. Easy enough, right? But in the technical language of Islamic law, what's known as fiqh, it's way more specific. It refers to a particular act you do to achieve a state of ritual purity. And that state is a non-negotiable prerequisite for prayer. It's kind of like the key that unlocks the door to worship.
But the really crucial thing to get here is the why behind it all. This isn't just about washing your hands. The deeper wisdom, the whole point, is about creating harmony between your physical body and your spiritual heart. It's about lining up your outer self with your inner self, so you can present yourself before God in the best possible way, inside and out.
So how do you actually achieve this state of purity? Well, the legal framework is super detailed about it. It lays out very specific tools to be used for very specific purposes. Basically, there are 4 main goals or rituals for purification. You've got vudu, that's the minor ablution, then ghusl, the full ritual bath. Then there's this really fascinating one called tayammum. It's a dry ablution you do with clean soil when water just isn't around. And last, of course, is just the simple removal of physical impurities. Each one is tailor-made for a specific situation.
And the number one tool for most of this? Water, of course. But, and this is a big but, it can't be just any water. The text is super clear. It has to be what's called absolute water, and it has to come from one of these 7 natural sources. So what do they all have in common? They're all pure, natural forms of water, completely untouched by human hands.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting and, honestly, super logical. This framework sets up a whole classification system because it turns out not all water is created equal. Water can actually be in a few different states, and each state has its own specific rule.
The most important category is absolute water, and the definition is just brilliant in how simple it is. It's any water that you can just call water without adding another word to describe what it is. Think about it. You can say seawater, or you can just say water, and it's still water. But you can't say rose water and then just drop the rose. That's something totally different, right? So absolute water is pure, and it can also make other things pure.
This table really lays out the logic perfectly. So at the top, you've got your absolute water. That's the gold standard, pure and purifying. Then you've got used water. So picture the water that's already been used for wudu. It's still physically clean, right? But it's already done its job, ritually speaking. Next up is changed water. This is when something pure, like soap, gets mixed in and changes the water's nature. Again, it's still clean, but it's not absolute water anymore. The key takeaway? Neither used nor changed water can be used for another ritual purification. And then at the bottom, you have impure water, which is simple. It's not pure and it can't purify anything.
But wait, there's a really cool and super practical exception here, especially when we're talking about impure water. It all comes down to a specific amount, a threshold. Basically, volume makes all the difference.
And that amount is known as qullatayn. We're talking about roughly 200 liters or around 53 gallons. Now, here's the rule. If you have a large body of water like that, say a small lake or a huge tank, it doesn't become impure just because a little impurity touches it. The only way it becomes impure is if the impurity is so much that it actually changes the water's taste, color, or smell. It's an incredibly practical rule, something you can actually see, smell, and taste for yourself.
So when you step back and look at it, what we have here is this incredibly systematic, almost scientific approach to water, and it was developed over 1,000 years ago. From the noble family of a brilliant scholar all the way down to the exact volume needed to keep water pure, this whole framework just shows a profound respect for detail and for reason within faith. And that kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about. What does this amazingly structured system tell us about the deep, intricate connection between our physical world and our spiritual lives, even today?